Okay, I'm just going to get started as people continue to filter in. Hi, everyone, and welcome to this masterclass on legal apprenticeships. So, I'm just going to start off by asking our panelists to introduce themselves. I'm going to start with Evan. Could you just introduce yourself?
Hi everyone, I'm Evan. I'm a solicitor apprentice at DLA Piper, and I'm currently sat in the debt finance team within the core finance practice group. I previously sat in the corporate crime investigations team within the wider litigation and regulatory group last year. Thank you.
Thank you. Bridget?
Hi everyone, I'm Bridget. I'm a third year solicitor apprentice at DLA. I was previously sat in employment and corporate, and now I'm sat in litigation and regulation.
Amazing, thank you. So thanks for introducing yourselves. And just to give a start to the masterclass, we're going to look at introducing the idea of what a legal apprenticeship is. So starting with you, Bridget, could you tell me a bit about the kind of apprenticeships that your firm runs?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's two kind of apprenticeships. There's the solicitor apprenticeship, which is the program I'm on, and then there's the business services apprenticeship, which is quite different. But essentially, we have teams who assist fee earners in compiling bundles, in printing off documents, and they basically keep everything going. That they're amazing, and they help us so much. So that's the other kind of apprenticeship. And then the one I'm on is the solicitor apprenticeship. And that's the one that keeps you on track to qualify as a solicitor.
Great, thank you so much. And building on the idea of the solicitor apprenticeship, Evan, could you tell me why you chose to do this?
Yeah, sure. So I think the reason why I chose an apprenticeship might be a little bit different to others. I know for a lot of people, and especially people in my cohort, not just at DLA, but wider across all the firms, especially in the city of London, apprenticeships are most people's go-to first choice route into the profession. Whereas for me, originally I wanted to go to university. So I applied to Cambridge, UCL, Bristol, Durham, and Nottingham, and I was rejected from 4 of those and left with 1 Nottingham offer. I didn't really want to stay at home. So I came across apprenticeships on LinkedIn, and I only applied to 2 Linklaters in DLA. And yeah, I decided to do this route ultimately over my University of Nottingham offer because I seen a free degree, work experience, and the opportunity to build a career from the age of 18. And I think that's an undisputed opportunity.
Definitely. And I think that sort of touches on a lot of the benefits that people say are kind of the selling points of apprenticeships. Building on that, Bridget, what would you say are the benefits you found to doing an apprenticeship?
Oh my gosh, so many. So I guess if we start with the degree side of things, as everyone was saying, it's a free degree, which is really nice. But I found that the most useful thing is that because you're doing it in real time, along with working at the firm, you can actually see what you're learning and how it works in practice. And I have honestly found that has made me a much better uni student because you can just see how it plays out. And, you're looking at the lecture and you're like, you know what, I've actually done that myself. And I think it will also really benefit those who are taking SQE 2 specifically, because it does focus a lot more on the practical aspects of being a solicitor, like drafting and such. And then, of course, just having access to like the best minds in law, it's just incredible. Like the networking opportunities, the work opportunities, like I get to go to trial, to court. It's amazing. And we can ask our colleagues anything we want. We can benefit from their advice, their guidance, and we can learn from them. So learning from the best means that, obviously, hopefully will turn out to be amazing solicitors too. And it's just such a leg up in the industry. Like I've met so many amazing professionals at the age of 21. And if I wasn't still in university, I really doubt that I would have met those people.
Amazing, thank you. I think that sounds really interesting. And I definitely think that the opportunity to work whilst you're learning gives such a great context to what you're studying, as you said. I guess getting into the structure of it a bit more, Evan, could you sort of outline how it works in terms of how does an apprentice qualify as a solicitor? What qualifications do apprentices get, and how does that kind of work, I guess? If we could take the solicitor apprenticeship as an example, the trajectory over the years, what kind of points are there?
Yeah, so in terms of the overall structure, the solicitor apprenticeship is a level 7. It's 6 years long. And within that 6 years, you can almost break it up as a 4-year LLB law degree and then a 2-year solicitor qualification exam prep course. And within that, you also have the option to do the SQE Plus, which will turn your SQE into a LLM Masters. So coming out of it, you could ultimately end up with 3 qualifications: a bachelor's, a master's, and a solicitor qualification, all within one. And then in terms of actual qualification, as you'll have all the necessary qualifications, as in results and such as your LLB, your SQE, your LLM, you also meet the qualifying work experience requirements with the SRA. So in that aspect, within the last 2 years of your apprenticeship, you'll probably qualify the same way that a trainee would.
Fantastic. That's really useful. Amazing. I'm going to move on now to focus a bit more on the application process. But before I do, just a note to attendees to pop any questions you have in the Q&A. And then we'll have time for those at the end. So if you have any questions about apprenticeships or what's like working at DLA, please do pop those in at the Q&A and we'll get to those later. Starting to look at the application route, Evan, you mentioned that you saw that you kind of came across the idea of an apprenticeship on LinkedIn. But when you were kind of, I guess, researching where you wanted to apply, you mentioned you applied to 2 firms. How did you make that decision, and what kind of sites would you recommend to do that research?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, I mentioned previously about using LinkedIn. I think LinkedIn is possibly the best tool that anyone could use, especially because when you use social media or law firm websites, as I'll speak about in a second, you miss actual employees' personal posts where they promote it. So you don't know, like someone might share something or repost or like, and it might come up on your feed. So I think to build good connections on LinkedIn within the legal industry is really important, because you don't know, some opportunity might come up by chance. But taking away the chance aspect of LinkedIn, I'd say TikTok's great. Everyone uses TikTok. Just put in solicitor apprenticeships into the search bar and I'm sure you'll find some. But also using law firm websites. So if you're unsure of which law firms to look at, again, it's complementary to TikTok. You could use TikTok to find that. But also if you're unsure, you can go to like a rankings table or just Google law firms and check on all the websites. And speaking of websites, Legal Cheek is a pretty good source that I found to be very useful, because they have a most list and they rank like all the solicitor apprenticeships available. And also I know on lawcareers.net they have a legal apprenticeships vacancy page, which is very helpful, and that's regularly updated, and also a guide to solicitor apprenticeships. And similar to what we're discussing on the panel today, you can also find other solicitor apprentices' experiences on there, which might be very helpful to you.
Great, thank you. Yes, and yeah, thanks for shouting that out for them as well. We have a guide, it's called our Guide to Law Apprenticeships, which you can access but we have an online version, we have a printed version. It's very useful to sort of get a grounding of what the apprenticeship route looks like. Amazing. And then sticking with you, Evan, in terms of the application process a bit more, what was that like, I guess, once you submit that initial application? Can you talk us through that a bit, and maybe any advice you have for prospective applicants?
Yeah, sure. So in terms of the actual application process, each law firm will vary. And as I've only been through the Linklaters and DLA application processes respectively, I can really only comment on the DLA one, as that's the only one I went all the way through. So there'll be a written application, a video interview, and then an assessment centre. And the assessment centre is usually split up into loads of different tasks. So you might have a group task, presentation, an interview. You might have another written task where they ask you to review some documents. It could all change, and it changes year to year. So no one's assessment centre will be the same as mine or the same as the previous years, most likely. It can be intense. There's usually over 500 apply to most solicitor apprenticeships at global or even regional law firms. And maybe even more than 500 plus. And firms will typically maybe only take 1%. I know some law firms are known for taking lots of apprentices. I know there's one firm in particular that takes like 15 a year, and that's great. But firms like DLA only hire like around 5, so it can be intense. And in terms of, so that's what the application process looks like. In terms of what my advice would be, if it was to pinpoint one specific piece of advice that can be used throughout an entire application process, it would be to not just mention an experience and then use the skill to support the experience, but speak in depth about your skill and then speak about how your experience created that skill or benefited you towards achieving an improvement for that skill. And I think all experience can be legal or non-legal. I never had any legal work experience, so I mostly spoke about my hobbies, which is why the skill is the most important. Law firms aren't really bothered about what experience you have. They just want to know that you have the skills to improve and to be successful in the future, and that you use your experiences out and about in the world to provide an example and context for that skill. So that would be my main advice.
So, and that's really good advice. And yeah, linking those skills to what the firm's looking for, definitely. And then in terms of, I guess, finding out more about the firm, which is obviously another core part of succeeding in your application, you want to have a really good understanding of the firm. Bridget, could you tell me, does DLA run any kind of open days or events that prospective applicants could attend to find out a bit more?
Yeah, so DLA runs discovery days. I think one is actually happening today. And that's a really great opportunity to meet people from the firm and to ask them loads of questions and really get to know them. Because one thing that's really key at DLA is the values. And I think that you really get to see the values when you meet the people and then decide if it's the firm for you. I do think that applies generally across firms. But yeah, I think the Discovery Day is really great for people who are interested in looking at the apprenticeship for DLA specifically.
Fantastic, thank you. Right, now moving on to one of the other points that was covered in our initial poll, which is finances. Evan, could you tell me a bit about what extent the costs of the apprenticeships are covered by DLA?
Yeah, cool. So obviously I mentioned earlier about you get a free degree, and obviously all your qualifications are paid for by the firm. But also upon joining the firm and receiving a competitive first year salary, you'll also receive a generous signing bonus, which is nice, and that helps with buying clothes, relocation, or travel, or even just some money before you eventually get your first paycheck. And also, that is quite similar to other firms, and also similar to other firms, there are salary reviews each year that may result in an increase. So along with the free degree and the free qualifications, you're also very much looked after throughout your apprenticeship. So yeah, I think that should answer the question.
Yeah, that's great, thank you. And then obviously you've mentioned a bit about the costs of the costs covered in terms of perhaps buying clothes for work or within the signing bonus and stuff like that. Bridget, could you tell me, how do apprenticeships support improving access to the profession?
Yes. So essentially, because I think it does depend on the type of firm you choose. They're all amazing, but specifically in my experience, because DLA is a very large global firm, I have been able to meet so many different types of people, because you get different types of exposure. So obviously internally you get to meet like partners, senior partners, legal directors. And then you get to meet the people that literally like solve your everyday issues. So, the business services teams, they are incredible. And then, wider, I guess, when I've gone to trial, I've met judges, I've met barristers. That is really key. Meeting barristers is amazing. They're so interesting. They're really smart. They're so on it. And they're just really entertaining to talk to. And then any networking event you attend, you'll meet people from different areas in the profession. So I've met people who sort of used to be solicitors, but now they might do consultancy work. I've met people who are actually clients, and are at this event as well. And then, of course, you do have the client events, and you get to meet people from massive companies that we're acting for. And it's just really great because it shows you that the client is made up of people, and the client leaves with an amazing impression because they have actually met the people who are doing their legal work. And then, of course, the more people you work with, the more you learn. There's just so many different walks of life that you just interact with throughout the week. So I just think it's incredible. I do think that same access may not be available at universities. Obviously, universities do differ, but I do think that it's just literally doing the job that opens up that pathway to people. Because of course, like as an apprentice, I'm sitting for maybe like 5 hours in a courtroom with a judge. I don't think university students experience that same type of exposure, because even if you're overseeing a trial, you're there, you're not really involved, you're watching it, whereas we are involved. So you're really sort of looked at by the judge. And I do think that is really good for exposure and understanding what's needed from you, especially.
Great, thanks so much. So now moving on to structure and experience section of this masterclass. I'm just going to start off by asking, which I think is quite a key question, Evan, how does being an apprentice differ to being a trainee? Do you get quite similar opportunities, or would you say that it's quite a similar structure, or is it quite different?
So I think the overall structure is really different, as in the length of the program, and you obviously have 1 day off a week for study, which is protected. But other than that, and obviously I can't speak for other firms, I think DLA treat apprentices fairly equally to trainees. So although it's the apprentice's responsibility to source work, build trust, and create responsibility for themselves, which will lead to more work and lead to better work being completed, and then lead to bigger tasks, such as what a trainee or NQ might produce. Some apprentices actually get more opportunity than trainees, in the respect that your seat, for the most part of the apprenticeship, is a year long. At DLA, it will only move to 6 months for your last 2 years. So if you've got a seat that's 6 months longer than a typical trainee, when you get to the end of that year, you could, if you've built the responsibility and the trust, get a first stab at some associate work towards the end of the seat. So, for example, last year in my corporate crime investigations team, I was trusted with drafting investigation reports, and within that investigation, I was responsible for drafting a whole addendum, which, for anyone who doesn't know, is sort of almost like a phase 2 report that will go supplemental to the main report. And I was also responsible for assisting in drafting a witness statement. And they're the sorts of tasks that only an exceptional trainee NQ or an associate would be completing. So I think actually, besides the different structure within the programs, an apprentice probably gets more opportunities than a trainee, opposed to what people on looking might perceive as less opportunities when they consider that you're younger, you've only come from school, you haven't got a degree. Really, none of that matters, providing you present as a competent junior lawyer.
Thank you. And I think that sort of sparks the question for me as well. Speaking about, I guess, the overarching structure there of what a year might look like and how much experience you get over that time. But in terms of on a more sort of granular level, what does the typical day look like for you, Evan, as an apprentice?
Yeah, so in terms of everyday sort of tasks, we might be responsible for drafting, reviewing, and providing comments for documents. It really varies on different practice groups, so I can only really speak from my experience. Bridget might be able to shed some more light from her first seat, but you might be responsible for bundling, so creating court bundles that have all the evidence ready for the judge. Investigations bundles for interviews when we're interviewing a suspect or someone that we want information from. You'll be responsible for putting that together. Proofreading, so you get the really basic tasks like proofreading. Sometimes you'll be responsible for tasks like delivering documents. So once I was entrusted with delivering 5 bundles to a High Court judge's house on a Friday night, which was an interesting one, especially when I knocked on the door and his wife answered while she was baking. That was quite funny. And yeah, so it can vary really, but I think that your responsibility on those tasks probably varies on the complexity and who you're working with. So some people might be a little bit more hands-on and give you a little bit less work or less responsibility because they might want to make sure it's done properly or whatever the reasons might be. Whereas some people are more relaxed and just let you run with things. So it's definitely dependent on practice groups and performance. And the more you trust it, I think the more responsibility you'll have and the higher level of tasks you might have. I don't know if Bridget wants to add anything else on what sort of tasks she completed last year or anything different.
Yeah, that'd be great.
I know we've both done a lit and reg seat.
Yeah, I'll comment on employment and corporate then. I'm employment in my first year, it really ranged. Like I would say they eased me in, but within 5 months I was doing settlement agreements. So that's when instead of a matter going to court, in this case it would go to an employment tribunal. The parties agreed to settle, so we would draft the settlement agreement. So I was doing that. I was doing witness statements for hearings and being on the witness calls. I was doing live contract negotiations. I can't mention the client, but it was very cool, I assure you. It was just incredible. And then, of course, attending a lot of hearings. I got the opportunity to attend them all around England, really. And London is quite frequent. So an amazing range. And then in corporate, it is more steady because corporate is transactional. So you tend to repeat a lot of the same work, just in different matters. So, for example, a lot of it was drafting ancillaries. So ancillaries are the type of documents that accompany a deal. So, for example, a share certificate, minutes, the agreement by the shareholders that the deal will take place. It's all those kind of documents. I was also sending out documents to be signed by the client. we were doing due diligence reports. So that's when you investigate the seller. You frequently do this for the buyer. You investigate the seller to check that they're not hiding anything, everything's okay, and the deal can proceed because you have all the information that you need to know. That's just, I mean, those are just the examples off the top of my head, to be honest, but it's just amazing. So that was my everyday.
That sounds like you both had a very varied, have very varied work so far. And something I also wanted to ask you about, Bridget, is obviously you have that 1 day a week for study. How does that work, and how is that protected?
So it works by, we all have one set day a week. You can't choose your own day, but we have Monday, which I love. I think it's really good. So I'm very happy with that. And obviously it means that the rest of your week flows. So Tuesday to Friday you're in. If it was on Wednesday, I think it would create a bit of a stopgap because it would just be a very abrupt end and then start in the middle of your week. But that day is completely protected in all the teams I've been in. I have never, ever once been even remotely asked to work on a Monday. I think they wouldn't even dream of it, to be honest. When I enter a team, I do make a point of saying I will be off on Mondays, and I do put it in my work calendar just to make everyone aware. So I think that is vital, but I would say that you can definitely complete the study in the quiet you need. So it's really great. I hope that's encouraging. Like, it's not encroached on at all.
It's really great to hear. And I guess speaking a bit more on well-being as a topic, what initiatives does DLA more broadly have in place, Bridget, to support the well-being of apprentices?
So, I mean, when you join the firm, you're paired immediately with an apprentice buddy. So that's a person you can ask questions for that you might think are silly or things that you've been told before and you just want to confirm. And the reason I link that to well-being is because I think it's really great to have that sort of inbuilt friend / junior colleague when you join. And everyone's lovely. They proactively want to help. So I've only ever had very positive relationships. And then you get a supervisor in that team, and they are there to support you. They do weekly check-ins, and they do check in with you on all aspects that you're comfortable to share. So if you're struggling, you can share that with your supervisor, and they will do everything they can to help. It's a very open relationship. Like, my supervisors have been fab. They will genuinely try and support you. They can also manage your workload to some extent. So if you're feeling overwhelmed, you can go to them and they can take some things off your plate, so to speak. There's also the overarching team that cares for the apprenticeship. So they have thrown events where we all come together and meet each other. And then, of course, you've got your general support of your team. I would say that we are quite protected as apprentices. So if we're in too late or in too early, generally most people in the team will ask, what are you working on? Can we help? Don't work too late. There is a real focus on that. They do try and keep your hours maybe more regular, I would say. As you go through it, I think you get to more and more of an associate level experience. But definitely in my first year, there was a lot of protection around hours. And I know that in litigation and regulatory, actually in the team you were in, Evan, they have a lot of focus around the type of work you're exposed to. So if there's any trigger warnings or trip hazards for you, you can just say, please don't involve me, and there won't be any repercussions at all, of course. So there's quite a lot of nets in there.
That's really great to hear. I guess following on quite nicely from that, Evan, would you be able to tell me a bit about how you found the work-life balance of being an apprentice?
Yeah, sure. So just touching on what Bridget mentioned, I think work-life balance is quite good at DLA, and it's typically better than that of other firms. From what I've heard from apprentices within the wider cohort in London, Generally, you won't have to work on weekends. I think I have maybe a few times, and it was out of choice. No one was making me do that. It was just I had some bits and bobs to finish off, and I decided that I'd rather do that than do it earlier in the week because it'd be easier for me to manage other commitments. So generally, you won't. And evening plans, you're normally quite safe, but there may be times when you have to work, such as if you're on a tight deadline and the entire team's working, then you might be asked to work. Then again, if you have plans that you absolutely need to go to and you don't want to cancel them, I think a conversation with your supervisor or the senior lawyer who you're working with should suffice for you to be able to go to those plans. I remember speaking to a senior associate about it a few weeks ago, and they were like, "Oh, if you have plans at this time, then I'll probably have plans too, so don't worry about it." So I think there definitely is that kind of culture. In terms of working hours, I'd say I usually work from around 9 until 6:30, maybe 7 o'clock in some cases. That's sort of like my general average. Again, it will vary between practice groups. So if you're in, I don't know, tax, they're known for having quite relaxed hours, whereas if you're in corporate, the hours might be a little bit longer and the expectations might be a little bit higher. But then again, it also relates to what year of the apprenticeship are you in, because if you're in the first year, you're probably not going to have the same level of expectation as what you might do if you're in the 5th or 6th year. So yeah, I think it's just important to note that working hours and expectations definitely change between practice groups and different areas of the firm. But the one thing that is always protected is your study day. I have never done anything on my study day, as Bridget mentioned. So yeah, study time is definitely protected.
Thanks, Ellen. That's really interesting. And another topic I wanted to touch on as well was, I guess, location in terms of geographical location. What, as a starting point, Bridget, could you tell me where apprentices tend to be based at DLA?
Yeah, so I think we were based in England. I've known apprentices Leeds, Manchester, London, Birmingham. Am I missing out? I don't think so. Liverpool.
Did you mention Leeds?
Yeah.
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 Yeah, I think that's about it.
But also something, I mean, this might be irrelevant, but I think it's really fun, is that some offices have a theme. So the office in Manchester is called the Honeycomb, and a lot of the windows are in the shape of like a honeycomb. And the stairs have that same design. So in Birmingham, our cafeteria is based off Peaky Blinders, the Garrison pub. So it's quite fun in that way.
That sounds quite fun. Amazing. And Evan, you mentioned in our call before that you relocated for your apprenticeship. Could you explain a bit about that?
Yeah, sure. So I think starting off, you moved to a new city. You're probably 18 years old. I know with the new government provisions in place, no one's going to be older than 21. I think that's correct. That's the new thing that they've brought in with the levy. So if anyone wants to go and look that up after to check your eligibility, then I'd definitely suggest that you do so on a sidebar. But yeah, you move to a new city. You're quite young. You're 18. In my case, you've moved 110 miles from home. You know, it can be difficult. It's difficult to find your social circles, especially outside of work. Especially when, in my case, I'm the only one in the London office, only apprentice in the London office, rather, that's relocated. So everyone's already well established. And, you know, also it can be expensive. So you need to consider what your salary might be and how much rent and bills you're going to pay, especially in London where it's really expensive. And it can be quite difficult to navigate, but you know what? It's definitely worth it. Of course, I can always go home and visit. So really now I've settled in a little bit more, that's not really a problem. But I think what I didn't do and what would be beneficial for everyone else to do is ensure that you start planning as soon as you possibly can. Because I was left with bottom of the barrel accommodation. And that's because I left it like a week before I needed to move. So yeah, definitely be more prepared than what I was. But in terms of just touching back on the social aspect, when you've moved somewhere and you've been there for quite a while, you will meet people and it will improve. So my advice is be prepared, and when it gets tough, when you first move down, because everything's new and rather foreign, just persevere and make good opportunities for yourself and prioritize them as well, because if you're not enjoying where you've moved, odds are you're not really going to enjoy your job or your work. So you've really got to prioritize that life aspect when you first move down. So yeah, that would be my advice.
Fantastic, thank you. I think that's really good advice, and yeah, definitely good to be prepared with moving and stuff like that. I guess rounding up with a few sort of final overarching questions. Bridget, can you tell me a bit about what your favourite thing is about being a solicitor apprentice?
Very cliche, but the work. I never really enjoyed studying, and I really enjoy the work. Like, it is definitely the highlight of my week. So I think just the sheer exposure and the type of work I get to do, I absolutely love it. All the other benefits are fantastic, but I think that's the main thing for me.
Amazing. And I guess on the other side of that, Evan, what would you say has been the most challenging aspect, and how have you overcome that?
Well, I'll try not to be too negative. Time management and completing complex work whilst busy. It can be challenging, which is why being organised is really important. You organise yourself well, that probably isn't really much of a challenge at all. And sometimes balancing work, social life in university, and also with me balancing that along with my social and family life back at home can be difficult at times, which is why at DLA flexible working is quite a good benefit. So I can work from home 2 days a week. That would be including my study day. So I normally work from home on Friday now, because we've had a new 3-day policy brought in. It used to be 50%. But yeah, so I can work from home on a Friday, which means I can go home on a Thursday night and work from home on a Friday. So again, that, as long as you pick your good times, I don't think balance is that big of a challenge should you approach it correctly. But one thing that can really throw people off is if you're in a meeting and an issue's thrown at you and you don't really have any preparation, but you have to respond presenting as competent, can be quite challenging. So I suppose just to summarise that, time management and completing complex work while you've got a lot of responsibilities, and balancing those responsibilities with all the other aspects of your life, even when you aren't prepared for those responsibilities, can be quite a big challenge, but can definitely be overcome.
Amazing, thank you so much. I'm going to turn to some of our audience questions now. We've got one question which is about the A levels needed to apply for an apprenticeship at DLA. Do either of you know that off the top of your head? No worries if not. Yeah, Bridget?
So there are no grade requirements at DLA, but there are for the University of Law. And that's where we all go to university virtually. So they require a minimum of 3 Cs at A level.
Amazing, thank you so much. And then someone else has asked a bit about preparing for the assessment centre. Does anyone have any advice on that?
I think we both depends.
Yeah, I'm happy to take that one.
Yeah, absolutely.
So in terms of preparation, I think that it's hard to go into all the advice that I could possibly give. So again, use your skills. I've already mentioned that one, but I'll give another piece of advice, and Bridget can build on it if there's something that she wants to mention, and we have time. But I think the most important part of your application preparation is right at the start. So to write a written application, you need to do all your research. You need to know everything about the firm. You need to know this firm inside and out. You need to know what deals they're working on, what areas, what practice areas. You might even look into their financials. You might look at what the revenue is, what the profit per equity partner is. Not expecting you to mention that, but it might be helpful for later on. So what I'm saying is, if in the values are really important. So what I'm saying is, if you do all your research right at the beginning before you even write your written application, you don't have to do any more research for the rest of your application process. You can use all of that to prepare your interview responses, prepare your presentation. If you get it in advance, prepare your presentation. You can memorize facts to take into an interview. So the important part is at the start, because that's where all the hard research and work is really done. And then the rest, you should be able to use your skills and a little bit of practice to get you through that. So that's my advice. Do the hard work at the start.
That's really good, solid advice. Bridget, do you have anything to add?
I just have one last thing, and it might not work, but when you know which office you're going to have your assessment centre day at, for the interview, look up the partners and the OMP of that office, because you could be interviewed by one of them, and it will help if when they walk in, you might get a little light bulb and go, oh, I remember them from my research, and that actually happened to me. So that was super helpful. But I think I haven't covered anything else.
I think that's really good advice. And also, I think you can often find out a bit about the works that certain partners are doing at certain offices, or just generally, if you're interested in a certain office, thinking about like a practice area, what practice areas are their key ones and what work they could do, as well as the people, I guess, that operate, that work from that office. And that's quite good preparation for an interview with potentially one of those partners. One of a question that I had pre-submitted as well, which is about business development. What kind of opportunities are there to get involved in business development as an apprentice?
So in terms of business development, you might go to like client events and things like that. There's also a lot of networking events that you can attend. So I know DLA have a lot of like affiliates with external companies like City Century, for example, if anyone's heard about them. They do work in London, and also you might be able to do academic articles. They're good. Get your name out there, and it'll also support your academic development within the firm. In terms of just regular social aspects, I think maybe deviating a little bit from business development. But like most people, go to the pub on Thursday, and each department has a fund to utilise as well. So that's funding for team socials. So you can definitely build your network.
That's useful.
Oh, sorry, I just thought I could leapfrog off the back of that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we have opportunities in the Birmingham office. I don't know if they're the same for you, Evan. But we have certain partners like CBSO. So we get tickets to their events, and sometimes we have social sessions with them, and that's a really, really great BD opportunity. Often a partner will go, and certain juniors who want to will go along with that. But that's an example of opportunity for business development, because that's a potential client, and in any case, a very well-known, well-loved organisation in the city who have lots of links themselves.
Fantastic, thank you. And then another question I can see that's come through is obviously we've gone over what offices it's possible to do an apprenticeship at, but what's the kind of process of picking or I guess putting your preferences down when you're making the application to say this is where I would like to be based? How did that work for you guys?
Evan, do you want me to take this one?
Because... Yeah, sure, go for it.
Okay, fabulous. So you can't actually pick your office. At least in DLA anyway. So each year where they're hiring varies. Some years, like in mine, they were hiring in both Birmingham and London. So you could go for either. But some years they'll just hire in Manchester, then they'll go to Leeds, then they'll go to London and Birmingham. So it does switch around. So I guess when you're looking at the application, make sure you know which city it's in, and then I guess decide whether you'd like to move there or not. And as I said, it does vary year on year. So I was extremely lucky to get Birmingham when I did, but it could have been Manchester.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Great. So now I'm just going to move on to some final questions just to wrap up. Just some, I guess, general advice for the attendees looking to move into the apprenticeship route. Bridget, could you give a bit of advice, I guess, imagining someone's coming into their first day of work as an apprentice rather. What would you say is a good thing to know?
Yeah, I would say just be super enthusiastic and get to meet as many people as possible. I would say introduce yourself, don't be shy. And everyone will be super lovely, super interested to meet you. It's mainly about making that sunny first impression rather than maybe doing any legal work at all. I think it's just a great networking opportunity for the office. You're basically saying, hi, I've arrived, I'm here. This is who I am. And I think that's all I did on my first day. I just got to really know my team. We all went for lunch. It was lovely. And I think that's the best thing you can do. And they do ease you in. So it's a lovely first day.
Amazing, thank you. And then Evan, finally, if someone, I guess, was picking between the university route or the apprenticeship route, what advice would you give to them?
Well, different routes are for different people, I think, and especially different people with different perspectives. So it depends on whether you definitely know you want to be a lawyer or not. I'd say if you don't know at all whether you want to be a solicitor or a barrister. So I'd say if you haven't figured that out yet, then maybe the apprenticeship route isn't the best route for you. I think everyone should do what they feel is the best route for themselves. Like I'm not going to sit here today and tell people whether or not they should do an apprenticeship. Like that's for them to decide individually. And I suppose this is my advice, but hopefully today gave everyone some useful information so that they can weigh up their priorities against the pros and cons. I suppose in my situation, the apprenticeship ended up being the best route for me. But I think there is different considerations on both ends. So weigh up the pros and cons against your own priorities and do what you feel is best based on your career ambitions and what you want out of your career and overall life, because it's not just a career choice in some instances, it can be a lifestyle choice as well. So I think it's definitely something that you should take your time with and make sure that you get it right.
Amazing, thank you. I think that's really great closing advice, and hopefully people have found out lots of information today that will help with that decision. And because information is definitely power in terms of being armed with the facts when you're making that choice. And if people would like to find out a bit more, I'd definitely recommend checking out our apprenticeship hub and our apprenticeship guide, which we've put in the chat. So yeah, now I'm just going to wrap up now, and thank you everyone for coming today, and thank you Evan and Bridget for joining us. We hope everyone found this session really informative and you're now feeling more confident in your journey. I'm just going to do a final poll to find out a bit about people's key takeaways. So I'll just give people a few seconds to answer that. Fantastic. It looks like you've got a really good range of key takeaways. People feel like they know more about the structure of the apprenticeships, understanding how they differ from training contracts, and feel more confident about crafting applications and the costs of an apprenticeship. So that's really great. Amazing. So before everyone goes, just another reminder to attendees that we'll be sending out a link containing the recorded session. So please do keep an eye out for that. A survey will also be popping up once this masterclass has ended. So please do fill that in. It's really useful to find out a bit more about what you thought of the day, the session today, what you enjoyed, and what other topics you would like to see us cover in the future. Please check our Apprenticeship Hub for more information, and you can also use the Apprenticeship Board, as Evan mentioned earlier, for upcoming opportunities. Thank you so much to our panellists. We look forward to seeing everyone next time, and remember that all of our masterclasses can be found on our events page. Thank you and goodbye.